Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight's Shiur. The Halacha Shiur this evening is entitled Kiruv, in inviting non-religious guests for Shabbos meals. This is a fascinating topic, and it's something which is connected to this week's parasha. How is it connected to this week's parasha? Because after 36 years, Yaakov Avinu is reunited with Esav. And the Pasuk says, "Vayokam balayla ahu vayikach eshtei noshav eshtei shivchei Esav v'es achad soyilodov." And he takes his 11 children. Rashi straight away points out there's one missing. Says Rashi, "V'dina heichen hoisa." Big discussion how Rashi knew it was Dina. Okay, not for now. "V'dina heichen hoisa." Where was Dina? Says Rashi, "Nosna b'teva." He put her in a box. V'noah b'foneha, and he closed the box. Shleitin bo Esav Einov, that Einov shouldn't cast his eyes on Dina. And Yaakov was therefore punished because he held back Dinah from encountering Esav. And maybe she would have been a very positive influence on Esav. And therefore, the whole story with Shem happened later as a result of this incident. So you see the concept of positive exposure. Perhaps Dinah would have been a positive impact on Esav. Now, so therefore this is a bit of a segue into this concept of inviting non-religious guests for Shabbos meals. Before we go into the nitty-gritty of this particular question, just as a starting point, as an introduction, is there an obligation to do kiruv? Perhaps we could turn around and say that, listen, charity begins at home. I have no obligation to look beyond my immediate circle, and maybe there isn't a chiyuv to do kiruv or to show others who have less opportunity, to show them the beauty and the richness of Yiddishkeit. So, just what I put on the sheet here, if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. But I've put on this handout 4 possible sources as to why there could be an obligation, a chiyuv, to do kiruv. The first one is Kol Yisrael, Arevim Zelozeh, that every Jew is a guarantor for the other Jew. We're all one big family. Last Shabbos, we had some guests for lunch. So when they came, I said, "Have you all heard Kiddush?" A couple hadn't heard Kiddush. Now, I'd already made Kiddush. So what is the? They can make their own Kiddush, but they asked if I could make Kiddush. What is my allowance to make Kiddush for them? I've already made Kiddush. I've heard the mitzvah. I've done the mitzvah. The answer is Kol Yisraelim Arevim Zelozeh. And what does that mean? That if my guest hasn't heard Kiddush, there is a lack in me. And therefore I'm allowed to make Kiddush for that little bit of me that hasn't heard. What does it mean that I've made Kiddush? No, because she hasn't heard, therefore there's a bit of me that hasn't heard. That's really what it means. So Kol Yisraelim Arevim Zebozeh, Gemara in Shavuos, Lametes Amud Aleph. So that's one obligation. Therefore a lack in the other person is, there's something chased, there's something missing in me as well. Another obligation is, of course, Hechiach Techiach Sametecha. The Rambam says, if you look in the second box on the page, Hareach Haver Shechoto, a very interesting Rambam. Hilchos Deis Perek Vav Halacha Zayin. Someone who sees his friend sinning, or Shehalach B'derech Le'Tova, or is not on a good path, Mitzvah Lachzir Lemutav, there is a mitzvah to try and get that person back on the correct path. V'lohodia Shu Chayte Al Atzmai B'Maisiv Haroim. And to inform him or her that he or she are doing the wrong thing. It's one of the most difficult mitzvahs of all mitzvahs to do. To do it in a way which is impactful. And there are lots of parameters, maybe we'll have a topic on it another time, but it's a very, very hard mitzvah to do. And listen to the advice of the Rambam. Good to speak gently, Beloshen Raka, in a soft language. I'm doing this for your benefit. This is going to bring you to the world to come. And this is perhaps a very striking, bold line of the Rambam. Anyone who has the ability to protest, and does not protest, he is also culpable for this aveira, because he could have protested. Which is a very powerful line. So therefore that's the second obligation. Every Jew has an opportunity, the mitzvah, of Hechiach Techiach Esametecha. The third obligation could be that it's the fulfillment of the mitzvah of Avas Hashem, to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you have a person who loves a certain thing, he'll talk about him the whole time, whatever it may be. And therefore, I don't want to go into the whole thing, there isn't time, we'll run out of time, but look at the last line, He says, Hin Choroye Ba'alil, says the Chovetz Chaim in his Sefer Chomes Hados, in the Hakdama, Shehazrizus Echad Lechaveru Lekiyum Das Hashem. If a person encourages another person in a religious way, he etzem ha-mitzvahs haseh shel avas Hashem. It's just an expression of your avas Hashem. Avas Hashem is one of the 613 mitzvahs, is one of the 6 mitzvahs tamidias, and therefore, if you love HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you want to tell everyone about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You want to encourage others to have a connection as well. And then the 4th obligation is a very interesting one, and it's actually Hashavas Aveda. Right? Hashavas Aveda says, again, it's the Chovetz Chaim in Sefer Chomes Hados. This is Maimon Gimel. Kosav Batorah, ki sifka shar oivecha, when you encounter the ox of your enemy, or his donkey, toyeh, straying, he's lost, hoshev teshivenu lo, you have to return it. Umizen nuchal nispainin, and from this we can extrapolate. Im chosa ha-Torah kol kach al mamoyna shel Yisrael. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so concerned about the financial assets of another Jew, even on his donkey or his sheep, and is straying from the path, it needs a lot of effort to get this donkey or this sheep back to its owner. How much more so you have to have rachmanos on a Jewish soul that is straying from the path. Even if it needs a lot of effort. So very interesting observation of the Chovetz Chaim. So 4 possible obligations of Kiruv, Arevus, Hechech, Techech, Sameteach, Avas Hashem, and Hashavas Aveda. And just to add that, aside from anything else in the halachic obligation, I think, every situation, every family is different, but I think by and large it enhances your whole Shabbos table. My wife and I for many years now have been on the JLE hospitality list, and we've had all types over the years, and it enhances our Shabbos table and Yom Tov tables and the experiences and the conversation, and in a way the concern is your own family and your kids, but in a way actually having conversations on these sort of sometimes more meaningful conversations, it actually is part of your kids' chinuch, and it actually you can educate your kids and you can help them in a sort of indirect way. But again, every family is different, every situation is different, and charity does begin at home, and you need to balance it with the needs of your own family and your own situation, but that shouldn't be overlooked. Now, inviting a Shabbos guest, when they're going to be Mechal Shabbos, how does that work? So interestingly, the famous tshuva on this topic is Rabbi Sternbuch. Rabbi Sternbuch is now his man who's nearly 97 years old. He was the first hospital. They gave the hesped for the dying, his brother-in-law, last week. And this is a question that was put to him. This is in the first volume of Tshuvas Van Hogus in Shin Nun Ches. Says the question: Ben Baal Tshuva. There was a young man who became a Baal Tshuva. Mazmin Hayrov Lesudas Lel Shabbos. He invited his parents to a Shabbos Suda. And he knows that his parents are going to drive home on Shabbos. So he wants to know, am I allowed to invite my parents for a Shabbos meal in the knowledge that they're going to drive home? Okay. Hine, let's look at this. Second last paragraph on the page. Hine tainus habenhi, the argument of the son is, shebederech zu hu mekarves hayr liyadus. By inviting his parents to the Shabbos meal, he's going to bring them closer to Yiddishkeit. But he's just concerned that he's going to cause them Chil Shabbos by causing them to drive home. But on the other hand, they're not keeping Shabbos anyway. And sadly, it doesn't bother them. His hope is that slowly they're going to become more religious. He's already seen the progress sheyesh etzlam. Kvar gisha acheres lados. They're already, making small strides. And he attributes this to the fact that he invited them and he has a relationship with them, and they come to his house, even though they travel home afterwards. So it seems like it's already happening, and now maybe he's got a guilty conscience. I don't know. And he asks from Sternbuch, is this allowed? Nire. It appears sheyesoid ha'isad lifnei iver hu dumya da'ar shemachshilei. The whole issa of lifnei iver, causing another Jew to stumble, is only if it's analogous to causing a blind person to stumble. But if you're trying to benefit this person, then perhaps it's not considered a stumbling block. If a surgeon is performing surgery, he's causing an incision in the body, that's not called grievous bodily harm. That's not called makeh chaverei. I'm not causing any bad for this person, or give him a bad piece of advice. I'm just hoping that they're going to come back and keep Torah and mitzvahs. He is causing this on himself. I'm not causing him to stumble. And therefore, if Shambach says this is not considered a problem of lifnei iver, the kiven she'ena mitzvah, I'm not a mitzvah, so I'm not instructing them to ride. I'm just inviting them to the meal. I'm not saying to them, okay, now get in your car and drive home. On the contrary, they see my distress and my upset and the fact that they're driving home. There's no even concern of arevus, etc. There's no issue of lifnei iver over here. And then he goes on, he says in the next paragraph, very interestingly, there could be a problem of chil Hashem. If all of a sudden a car rocks up outside your house on Friday night or Shabbos morning, and the hosts, your parents get out of this car to come for the Shabbos meal, maybe there's a chil Hashem here. He says, so therefore, you know what you can tell them? Tell them don't park outside. Amazing. Don't park outside. They're in the area and they just parked around the corner or something. Amazing. And in short, Reb Sternbuch allows it, and he gives various arguments. One argument is that the guest is desecrating Shabbos regardless of my invitation. He's going to be Mechal Shabbos, and sadly he's not religious. Moreover, he's actually minimizing his Chil Shabbos, because the several hours that he's going to be in my house, he's not being Mechal Shabbos. If he were not to be in my house and he'd be home, who knows what he'd be doing. Furthermore, when he's in my house, he's eating kosher food. So aside from the Chil Shabbos, if he was home and eating Friday night meal, Shabbos lunch at home, who knows what he'd be eating. Also, he adds, there's no Messiah, aiding a sinner, for someone who deliberately sins. And the purpose of the invitation is for Kiruv, and it's not to aid the sinner. Now, I should add that there is it's not a unanimous decision this. There are other poskim who disagree. And famously, Ramosha, in a tshuva, this is in Tov Shin Yud Gimel, which is 1953, so it's a very old tshuva. The bottom box there, Nishalti Meharav Naftali Kalabach from Detroit. Ramosha was asked this question. Now there it was different. It wasn't a Shabbos meal. He was clearly the Rav of the shul, and he wanted to encourage people to come on Shabbos, but he fully understood that people are going to drive to shul. I don't know exactly the circumstances of his shul and where the congregants lived, but it was clear that his concern was they were going to drive to shul. And Moshe said to him, if this is going to cause Chil Shabbos, if there's no way they could come without driving, Vadai Osa. But although Moshe says it's also, the consensus and the contemporary practice certainly is to be lenient. And in fact, in a letter to Ar Sameach, the famous Kiruv organization in Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim Zalman Auerbach was lenient, but he did add, and this is the important but, that a guest who is not within walking distance should be offered accommodation. He should be offered the opportunity to sleep over, and if they choose not, then that's their prerogative. And that is the standard practice, and therefore most Kiruv organizations across the world, they would encourage local, the communities to try and to invite them. And they would offer hospitality, or they or you would offer hospitality, and if they choose not to, then it would be acceptable according to the consensus of poskim. So it's an interesting topic. There's much more to explore, but those are some of the issues.